Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mindalia TV livestream, where people from all over the world gather daily to watch the interviews and talks organized by MindaliaTV.com. In this occasion, we have Angel Rebo with us, who is an entrepreneur, a CEO coach, president of Wisdom for Kids, and host of Mindalia TV, conducting an interview to a very special guest, Mr. Stan Sorensen, titled How to Help People Struggling with Mental Illnesses Now and Forever. Stan Sorensen runs a healing center which integrates primary care, substance abuse, and mental health services. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Also, he has a journey of 71 years that had taken him through a multitude of fields, including child abuse, alcoholism, transformation, spiritual inquiry, and a 17-year personal career in Japan as a teacher and a 30-plus year personal career in California as a therapist. But right before we welcome our guest and we start with our interview, I would like to remind you all that if you would like to help the world through Mindalia, there are a few things that you can do. One of them would be to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mindalia TV, give us a like on this video, or leave a positive comment down below this video as well. Please note that with these actions, you're helping us reach even more people around the world who can benefit from the content that we share in our channel. Also, to allow your interaction, please remember there is a chat on the side of your screen, which you can use to ask the questions that you would like to our guest, who will kindly answer to them by the end of his interview. It is time now to welcome Angel Rebo and our guest, Stan Sorensen. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paola. Thank you very much to everybody watching us here today at Mindalia TV. We are extremely blessed to have with us tonight the one and only Stan Sorensen. Hi, Stan. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm just great. Not as great as I intended to be, but that's great. You know, I'm my best self right now.
Excellent, excellent. So we're very, very happy to have Stan here. He's one of our most loyal. Let's put it this way: most loyal fans at Mindalia TV since the very beginning. He's actually, really watching a lot of our experts and interviewees interviews and talks. And besides that, so that everybody knows, Stan Sorensen has been, in the mental healing world for a long, long time. Could you tell us a little bit, how did you start in that field, Stan?
Well, that's a long story. That could take up the whole interview, how I started. But I think I started when I started into the mental field when I was a child. And I went through some hard times with, well, I guess just the normal psychological abuse that children get in families, or the constrictions that are put on children in families, some physical abuse, and then some sexual abuse, all by the time I was 4.5 years old. That's how I got started in the mental field, because that set me up for a long journey of discovery and recovery.
Wow. Would you like to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, before I elaborate, I wanted to know, how did you come up with a question like that?
Well, just, I think the audience likes to know a little bit more about, who they are watching and why they ended up doing what they do today. Our experience is that typically our audience, is looking for answers. Some of them are in pain. Some of them are suffering. We try to help as many people as possible. Our let's say our history tell us that, those stories of all our interviewees and guests are very often tied to some difficult moments, and that ignites in them, a sense of having to fight and having to overcome some challenges that made them or make them be outstanding people throughout their lives. So that's why I asked you that question.
Okay, well, that sounds like you doesn't sound like the usual question you ask, and I was just curious because you amazed me with your way to get an interview going. So if I wanted to elaborate on how I got started in the mental health field, I guess, like I said, I went through a period of time in my life that was very, very hard and very difficult for me to enjoy, you know, growing up. So, and in fact, I have a long story that starts with a little event that happened when I was a child, and I was crying about something, and my father would come to me and he'd say, "You want to cry?" Now, I usually ask people, "What's the rest of that line?" And about 99% of the people that I encounter these days as clients, they know the rest of that line just like that. "You want to cry? What is it? What is it, Angel?"
I don't know.
I know, because you probably, the 1% that usually don't answer it, they probably grew up in another country with another language. And then when I give them the answer, "Oh, yeah, we have that in French or Spanish or something like that." So you want to cry? I'll give you something to cry about.
Oh, no. I had never heard that.
Oh, well, you're one of the blessed ones.
Okay, I understand.
Like I said, about 99% of the people that I encounter, and I encounter them on a regular basis coming into the healing center, they know it just like that. They know the other rule: the children are to be seen and not
Heard.
Oh, you got that one. Okay, got that one right. How about this song? I heard this song 4 times in December last year in public restaurants. Goes like this. See if you know this one. "You better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. Because if you don't put that smile back on your face, you ain't gonna get nothing good for Christmas." You heard that song?
I've heard that song, yes.
You played that song for your kids and hope they'd follow it?
Well, probably they know that song better than me because they have been attending American schools. But you know what I'm seeing, Stan? I'm seeing that definitely your own story has allowed you to help a lot of people in your life. What do you think?
Well, yeah, of course. I think if I hadn't had that experience of being conditioned to keep my emotions in and turn my emotions off, that I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, because I had to go through my own recovery and be able to learn to cry and learn to shout, learn to express myself emotionally. And that's been a long time. And yes, I think the adversity of growing up as a child has helped. So just that, I know. I was talking to a man today. He's a very interesting man. He spent 38 years in prison with what we call the other death penalty, which is life without the possibility of parole. And it was interesting because my talk with him this morning, he's allowed me to share some of his information. But anyway, he actually is out of prison. He got out of prison in December. And he's kind of like, I call him, he broke the 4-minute mile by being one of the very few to be paroled when you have that sentence, life without the possibility of parole. And he told a story very similar to mine about how his father, who was a very strict man and raised him in a strict way, caught him crying one day. Well, his father said, "Are you a boy or a girl?" That's all. And he said that impacted him so much that he had to stop crying for the rest of his life. And now he is just now also going through that discovery that it is okay to cry. It's okay to let the emotions out. In fact, it's damaging to keep them in. So to me, just having the start of that, which also included some other aversive events, caused me to be very closed when I was a child and when I was an adolescent. I mean, I was terrified of females because they were my perpetrators, and you know, I was attracted to them too, you know, which is kind of a paradox. You know, I was going through the life change, and the hormones were saying, go check these out. They're looking pretty good now. And another part of me said, stop. You know, they're better and smarter than you. They bring shame into your life, and they get you in trouble. You know, so I said, yeah, you're right. I'll stay safe. So that's how I conducted myself being an adolescent. I hated it. It was the worst time of my life. You know, thank God I found alcohol. You know, alcohol at least gave me an opportunity to, you know, stop some of that crazy thinking that was holding me captive, holding me a prisoner. And so the problem is the alcohol kind of took over, you know. And then I found myself in another country about 21, 22 years old, and I was kind of like really depressed and drinking a lot, drinking to blackout. And that's not good. You know. And then something happened to me during that time. My mother sent me a book. And it's the first book I ever read on psychology. I got a copy of it right here. What's it say?
I'm okay. You're okay.
Oh, good. You can read it. I'm okay. You're okay. It's about 50 years old. Anyway, she sent me this book. And I looked at the title. I'm okay. Well, maybe you're okay, but I didn't feel okay. I didn't relate to that title. And so anyway, I started reading the book anyway. My mother sent it to me. I'll read it. You know, after the third chapter or so, the book talked about how we develop our self-concept and how that is a developmental process. And after about the third chapter, I said, you know, I should be depressed. After all that stuff that happened, I should be depressed. You know, so now I had an explanation, but it didn't change the depression. It was still there. So I read the book. I continued reading. And there was a line in there, and it said, that which is learned can be unlearned. And it's referencing self-concept. Well, my self-concept was pretty bad, but when I heard that, I said, oh, good, there's hope. There's hope for me. I don't have to stay depressed my whole life. So it changed. That was a pivotal, you know, reading that book was a pivotal moment. And I stopped drinking. I went back to school. I went to school I went to university, Sophia University in Tokyo, and I studied psychology, you know, trying to figure out, well, what went wrong, what I can do about it, what I have to unlearn, what I can learn new. And it's been a happy venture ever since. But I'll tell you, it took me 8 years going through undergrad psychology. I got involved with some other personal growth stuff going on in Tokyo, Japan, which was very, very helpful. And it was during that time that I felt myself go through that transition of being, you know, a little bit more okay than not okay. And it kind of cemented me into getting into the field of human growth and helping others. I mean, I got such great help with the people that I ran into in Japan that it kind of encouraged me, I want to do this. So that propelled me to research and find more. And I ran into another guy's work. His name was Ken Kais Jr. And he wrote a book called The Handbook to Higher Consciousness. And I read that book and I really liked what he was saying, because he was offering solutions that weren't just going to a workshop and getting a high feeling and then going back home and cooling off. He gave us tools that we could take out in our daily lives to start processing, you know, what was happening to us when those emotions did start coming out. Fortunately, at that point, I was able to let the emotions come and be triggered. 95% of our choices in life are unconscious. They're in that implicit memory place. So we're just doing them automatically, day in and day out, doing the same old routines, being triggered the same old ways. So learning that I could bring up those feelings and then let them go and think about it differently became my process. I was a teacher when I was in Japan. And I often said, looking back on it, I said, well, I was a teacher. That was my pretense. I was teaching English. That was my pretense. Really, I was having fun doing a whole lot. I was applying a lot of the stuff that I was learning in the process of teaching English. So I wouldn't say I was in the mental health field yet, but that was preparation, and that just reminded me of something that actually you helped me discover. I'm going to give you some credit here.
Thank you.
One day, I remember Angel Rebo, after attending some event in Los Angeles, he went and he found this bookstore called the Mystic Journey Bookstore. And he was down there in the Mystic Journey Bookstore, walking around with the guy that runs it. And the guy said, "See that book over there? That's the bestseller." And it was a book by Michael Singer, whatever, Michael Singer. And you mentioned, hey, this is the hot book. Well, I got the hot book right away. It was 10 years old. And I watched Michael on a couple of YouTubes, really liked the way he talked. And then I was thinking about getting his newer book, which is called, I got it around here somewhere. The newer book was called The Surrender Experiment. And you told me, Angel, in a telephone conversation one time, get the audio version. Because Michael J. Singer reads it himself. It's a story. So I took your advice. I signed up on audiobooks and I listened to this book. And one of the things that this book really emphasized was that every experience that you have in life is preparation for the next. Preparation for the next. So that started to really validate my path and the path of many other people that I know who are doing this work. That they've run into one thing after another that has prepared them to go the next step and to spread the message or the mission. I actually knew my mission when I was a junior in high school. I didn't know it was my mission, but it came to me. And I remember I used to hide in the what do you call it? The attic. I was a junior in high school and I hid in the attic. That's how scared I was of the world. But anyway, I remember writing on the wall my mission. It went like this. You can't stop somebody from thinking, but you can start them. And that became I didn't know it then. I was way, way unprepared. But I remember scrawling that on the wall inside the attic where I'd hide. Many years later, I realized what I was doing, and that was the mission. So that's what I do now. I start people thinking. Can't stop them, but I can start them.
Wow. That was a powerful story. Thank you very much for sharing all of it and for opening yourself so genuinely. Thank you so much. To your point, today when you to people and they come to you from many different places, let's say in their mind, how do you make sure that they start to think from the right place?
Well, I don't know what the right place is. So they know what the right place is. So generally I start with somebody and I take a moment to just kind of get tuned in. That's my way of working with individuals. Working with a group, it's a little different. I've done both. I worked 10 years in acute care hospital as a group therapist. That's how I got my start, really, back in 1989 or 88 or 87. So back in there, I started working at a hospital right after I got my master's degree as a marriage and family therapist. And so I was basically doing groups 3 times a day, 5 days a week. And my style of connecting then was just to sit and ask the simple question, who's up, what's up? And wait, and then somebody would start talking. And I usually pounce on them or, it would go that way. And then that would just sort of, they would tell me what to talk about or what the agenda was. I didn't know what it was because the hospital groups change all the time. There are other groups that same people are in there constantly, and that's a different kind of group. And of course, that one I wouldn't have to go cold from each start. But with individuals or with groups, I want to get a sense first and make a connection. After many years of doing that, I really believe we connect on a channel that isn't talked about in our textbooks. It is talked about in some circles, but we don't learn that in orthodox psychology. I don't think. I'm always looking for it, though.
And is that a channel that connects every one of us to something specific, or is it a channel that connects all of us together?
Well, I would say all of us together. And yet, you and I can connect right now. I happen to know you're in a faraway place called something Carmen, close to Cancun. But we can connect instantly, not through internet, but just through our spiritual connection. And so as I sit here and talk with you, I'm connecting. And sometimes I just turn it over and I kind of let you tell me what to say. I kind of let my clients tell me what to say. I mean, it's amazing. I have diverse clients and they come in and I'm supposed to do therapy with them. Well, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I've explored a lot of different forms of therapy, but so I have a repertoire, but what's going to come out really is always unique to the person that I'm sitting with. And it amazes me. Sometimes I'll sit back and I'll say, wow, this is going to be an interesting show. What's going on here? So I'm amazed at myself as a channel. I think more of myself as a channel when I'm doing the work with people individually.
Have you seen a difference? Have you noticed a difference between, let's say, the clients or patients that would come to you 20, 30 years ago and the ones that come to you today?
Well, yes, in a sense, because 30 years ago I was working in an acute care hospital, and most of the people that were coming in were usually very depressed and suicidal, and because of that, and they only were there for a limited amount of time, I had to work pretty fast. So I started back in that day. I would have to go pretty quickly to get the work done. And I had to do it in a group format. We didn't do the individual therapy very much, a little bit, not much. Now I do a mixture of individual therapy and group therapy, and I do workshops. And that combination to me is wonderful, because groups have an enormous power to be helpful for people. When you have a bunch of minds together that are all connecting. Individual is good. It's safer, I guess, for the client. They don't have to worry too much about all those rules they're breaking by talking about their scary places. So that's got its place. The group has its place, and then the workshops. I just love the workshops because we can actually spend more time and do some faster and really dynamic work. So I'm kind of doing what I've been done by, I guess, in terms of the workshops. That's where my passion is.
What about the issues that they bring to you? Do you think that they are almost the same kind of issues? Do you see similar, there are other trends on the issues that you're seeing today on your patients?
I get a diversity of issues now. Back in the days of the hospital, then for 10 years, I was also doing psychosocial rehab, which is a little different kind of involvement in the healing field. It de-emphasized therapy. So at that time, I developed an interest and an expertise in using what we call solution-focused therapy. Because solution-focused therapy is very amenable to, you could just have a conversation with somebody. It only involves about 5 questions. And you ask those 5 questions in a number of different ways, keep repeating them, and people will start to formulate their own solutions. We call ourselves bringer forthers. We don't teach, we don't give. We just draw from the client what their solutions are. And that takes a little bit of, it's a different perspective than some of the other therapies where you're problem focused and you're wanting to hear the story of the problem and find the distorted thinking and, but things have changed around a lot. We're doing a lot of other things. We're including mindfulness. We're including different kinds of therapy. Like for a while, we were doing equine therapy, going out with horses, working on the ground with horses. That was fascinating because of the horses and how they can connect and how they can reflect. They will pick up what's going on in a person and start demonstrating it before the person would ever come close to admitting it, and often I've seen some magic out there in the arena. I'm not doing that right now, but someday, I might get back into that. But I've had the blessing really to use a lot of different forms of therapy and play around. It's kind of like I'm involved in a healing center that's in a medical center. So we're integrating medical primary care with mental health. The bad news for the agency was that it's the status of this clinic says that my license is not billable. But they like me and they like what I was doing. So, and I had a cadre of volunteers, professional volunteers, students who are needing to get their experience, or people that have graduated and they need their hours to get their license. Well, my arms were open for that. So for the last, since 1995, I've been always supervising students, and we used to call them interns. Now we call them associates. And I just love that. That's in itself a big, important part of my life, is working with others. And I don't know if they like it, but, I always have fun with it. But helping people develop their skills as therapists or as helping people has been a joy. That's in addition to just doing the work with the clients. So the part I don't like the most is the administrative stuff, because unfortunately I always get sort of stuck in the, you're the director or you're the lead case manager back in the hospital. I always seem to get that position given to me, and I don't like that part. I like doing getting in with the people and doing the work, whether it's with clients or with interns. I love that.
You touched on a very interesting point, which is, you know, the young people that are trying to have that experience in order to be licensed. You know, do you see out of the let's say, out of the volunteers, are those young men and women today, are they any different from the ones that you saw a long time ago? Are they seeking the same kind of solutions? Are they looking to help the people the same way as before?
Well, that's the third time you've asked a question very similar to, you know, back then and now. Yeah, I think I've seen difference. You know, I don't know if it's a reflection of what our society is bringing into the field. It seemed like there was a time when those people getting involved were really really dedicated, really sincere, and I learned to appreciate them a lot. You know, I was the supervisor, but they brought in experience that I never could have. You know, their frames of references were just, it's like in a group therapy, you have a multitude of frames contributing to the dynamics. Well, when you get a multitude of different people coming in to work with the clients that you supervise, I just learned so much. I mean, I couldn't be in the frame of reference of a female. I get a lot of female students or interns. And so it's good for that to be happening around me, because I learn a lot, you know, sometimes the hard way. I'm laughing because I always have to give a warning to people before they accept a position. I says, you know, I push buttons, okay? And it's not easy to get along with me sometimes because I'm gonna, you know, insist on certain things. Anyway, I'm learning to soften up. I used to be a little more impatient.
So you're working right now inside like a, did you say like a clinic? Is it a clinic or is it a medical center?
It's a primary care clinic. It's got primary care, and we were just now beefing up our substance abuse. We haven't had specialists because we're expanding, and so we have substance abuse beefing up. We can do an outpatient program, a medium outpatient program for somebody, because we get people that come in that's their issue. They're court ordered. You know, I get a lot of court ordered people nowadays. That's the difference between what was before. Before, these were genuinely depressed people that wanted to die. You know, that was 99% or 90% of the people that ended up in the hospital. Nowadays, I don't get very many of those severely depressed people. My level of care is a little lower. But I get a lot of people with court orders because their kids have been removed from their home. They're in foster care, you know, and they're ordered to get therapy and parenting classes and stuff like that. So we provide a lot of that stuff for those people who come with those issues. And I used to teach parenting classes myself. It was a blessing to do that. So I always kind of found it a nice challenge. If somebody just comes in, they want a certificate or they want a letter that says they did what the court told them to do, they're not going to be very much invested in the process. So my challenge is to get them invested in the process. So I start using a system we call motivational interviewing, a little bit of that, you know, see what's in it for you. You got to be here anyway. Let's, you know, but usually what I want to do is to give them some hope that they can get something more valuable out of this experience than a letter that says they did something. So that's my challenge now. I I have a lot of that mixture. I do get people that are referred in straight out of the medical side of the clinic, and we work with the doctors. We interact with the doctors and keep each other informed, about our clients, so that we can treat the whole person, not, send people across town for their substance abuse and over there for their mental health and here for the primary. So I like that. I like the idea of the integrated, treating the whole person. That fits in much better with my overall philosophy of healing anyway.
What do you think should happen in centers like yours that is not happening today?
Oh, well, what's not happening today is, well, it is happening, but it's not happening the way I want to. I want to create jobs in my center and in centers like that. So right now I'm actually working in a work group in the community, looking for ways to help create jobs for new practitioners in the mental health field, especially. Right now they come and volunteer. They just give their time for the supervision and the hours, and that's the exchange. Always I've worked in places where there were jobs at the end of their internship. So they could volunteer and then they could get hired. We knew them, they knew us, they knew what they were getting into. It was the best way to do hiring for the agencies that I worked at. The agency I'm in right now, there's not jobs. So that's one of the things that's not happening, that we're working on, finding ways to create. And sometimes we have to do that at the legislative level because we're very constricted. It's a federally controlled program that I'm in right now. And you got to follow all these crazy rules. What is happening that we could use a lot less of are these crazy rules that keep us from doing our good work. The blessing I had was I didn't have to follow the rules because I was out of scope. That's a technical word, but I was out of scope for because I wasn't licensed in the right license to be billable. So we're basically giving away service, but no one cared what we did. So we could play around. That's why we could do, we even developed some new stuff like phototherapy. I mean, if you go look up phototherapy, you're not going to find a lot out there, except phototherapy that has to do with medical stuff. But I mean phototherapy with mental health. Phototherapy is just like an undeveloped type of therapy. We've done movement therapy. We have some people that are just experts. They specialize, they're students, but they specialize in something they really like and have a passion for. And I just love to get those people together. And the new healing center, it's not even called, it's called a Healing Exchange Center that's underway right now. In that center, I changed the name. I used to call it a Healing Center, but I changed the name to Healing Exchange Center because we are not concerned about necessarily being the experts who dole out healing. We are concerned about bringing people together and exchanging this information to improve, access, improve the quality of services that we provide. And that's a whole different kind of healing. There's no money involved. That's the cool, I mean, there's money involved. We live in a 3D world of Newtonian physics, so we still have to pay the rent and all that kind of stuff. But, I've been learning recently that there's other ways to tap into energy in the universe. And so I'm applying that now in the new healing center, alongside of the current old healing. I don't know what to call it now. It's kind of a transition for me. It's an exciting place to be right now. I'm almost even reluctant. I don't know who's going to, I hope nobody I hope a lot of people don't look at this.
It's too late, Stan. It's too late.
Okay. Well, anyway, the other thing that Michael Singer taught me was to surrender. And I've been concentrating on surrendering, especially probably in the last 6 months, ever since I got that book that you suggested. Listen to it. And I'm finding great value personally, you know. And last week, you knew I was in Cancun. We were really close, and I got to see you there, which was tops.
Thank you.
I regret that you weren't there like a particular group of us were there, but it was a fantastic experience of just getting deeper and more grounded in the knowing of how this works. You know, it's not. I don't think you can just read a book. Although I think reading books is an excellent way to trigger and get yourself. And the books come when you need them. Like Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul. It's a bestseller. It's been around for 10 years. I never heard of it, you know, but it came when I needed it, just when I needed it. In fact, you were telling me about another book not too long ago. I think the title of the book was The Celestine Prophecy. That's an old book. It's been around a long time. I read that I think I read that when I was in Japan. I don't know. I read it a long time ago. But I bet you have a little story about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was definitely one of the books that triggered in me one of the most defining moments.
Defining moment.
A defining moment, yes, exactly. Actually, that made me move from Europe to America. Absolutely.
Oh wow, this book was a defining moment producer. You know, I think books are just a wonderful. So you read that book and then you did what?
No, I just moved from Europe to America because of that book.
Oh, so. Just because of a book. You decide, well, you know, that's. I didn't move it. Maybe I went from Japan to the United States. I don't know. I can't remember exactly when I read that book. But so you came to America. In what part of America?
Yeah, it was Latin America. But before we moved to that place, and you started interviewing me, Stan, which I appreciate. Let me ask you something, because we're reaching the 45 minutes, which is the first part of the interview. Let me ask you something because the audience is going to be extremely willing to know, why do you define yourself as a frequent quantum traveler?
Why do I didn't define myself that way. Somebody called me that.
Oh, okay.
Well, quantum is now take the word quantum physics, quantum field of infinite possibility is now becoming very popular in the world of in psychotherapy. Even people are now recognizing there's a whole lot more in the healing world than just what we've learned in our egos, in our books, and our stuff like that. That you can go and be creative, and you can do healing work for yourself and for others in a very rapid and powerful way. And it's simply just realizing that matter, of course, is energy. We all know that, but we are programmed to experience it as hard and real. And that's our reality. And yet, when you get into the higher levels of vibration, above matter, you go into pure thought, and you go eventually into source energy, which is defined in a lot of different languages. But once you can get into source energy and that pure thought, then you can start creating thought that will now manifest in physical reality. And that has to do with the law of attraction. I've been a student of the law of attraction all my life, not knowing it, but when it became popular that was also a very impacting evolution of my own understanding and how it works in the world. But even with what I learned of the law of attraction from all the popular sources, did not prepare me for the quantum, the use of the quantum field as a place to do that kind of creativity. And so recently I've been just much more tuning into that. And you know as well as I do that we even hooked in with a woman called Lynn McTaggart, who wrote a book called The Intention Experiment. She teaches how people can use intention to change things. So change the world with thought rather than change the world with matter. You know, being forceful and violent is trying to change the world with matter. You know, I'll blow you up if you don't do what I want you to do, or I'll blow you up anyway just because I don't like you, whatever. But when you get into the intention of peace, let's say, and you can impact whole countries with just thought, that's amazing. That was exciting. In fact, we had a little discussion, me and you, once upon a time in a hotel lobby, or a hotel somewhere in Austin, Texas, and we started talking about Lynn McTaggart and her Power of Eight. And then we eventually created Power of Eight group. And I don't know if I have time to even talk about the Power of Eight group, but the Power of Eight group has, you know, there's this stuff about believing something. There's always a doubt when you're in belief, but there's this thing of knowing. When you know something, there's no doubt. You know, there's that saying, know the truth and the truth shall set you free. That's true. Believe the truth and it's a lie because there's a belief in there. You got to know it. So my experience, I'm going to give a little testimonial. When my little Power of we decided to make a Power of Eight group based on Lynn McTaggart's work of making groups of 8. So we formed this group. We go to this online meeting every morning, for me, 6 o'clock in the morning, and been doing that every morning since the beginning of the year. I think we started December 31st or something like that. And I got the blessing to be the attendee, the recipient of this group. And I'll tell you, I've had this problem with my back for a long, long time. And I started the healing process probably 3 years ago, but it created a kind of like disorganization. And this is another learning that I'm getting right now, is that in order to heal, you sometimes have to get rid of the bad formation, whether it's back or cancer tumor or whatever. There's a period of disorganization that happens, and it clears out, and there's chaos. And out of that chaos reemerges a reorganization that is healthy and cohesive and brings us back into harmony with ourselves, which we are all innately programmed to be in. So that Power of Eight group, they intended for me for 1 week just to reduce the pain in my back. But I'll tell you, they did more. A lot more happened. I mean, I had a doctor, and I can't tell you what the doctor told me about my back. This was about a year and a half ago. He said, Mr. Sorensen, your back is so up, and he used the F word. There's not a thing I can do for you. You've got this. He named off 5 things that I had. He says, even surgery won't help. There's nothing I can do for you. And that's how he sent me out the door. Well, there was something that others could do for me, and there was something I could do for myself. For me, it was opening myself to the quantum method of creating matter with thought, with pure thought, influencing matter with pure thought. And now my back has been pain-free. It was pain-free after 1 week of the intention with the Power of Eight group, but it not only got pain-free, it got back its ability to pick up things. You know, no more 15-pound limit. I'm picking up 50-pound bags of pet food, and I'm back working in my yard. I love it. And that's knowing it. I know it works. You know, after that guy told me nothing would work, I said, well, I found something that would. So that's it.
Wow.
45 minutes yet?
Yes, we have. We are already.
Do you have any questions? Any more questions?
Well, I have to tell you, Stan, yes, you'd better drink a lot of water, because there's a lot of questions from the audience. So I'm gonna start with the questions, okay? So, but before we go to them, could you please share with Mindalia TV's audience where can we find you? Where can we go and be in touch with you moving forward?
Well, I think at the below here, there's going to be a little description. It might have my email address, and it might have my phone number in there, and that's one way. I don't have a website. I don't believe that's in my need right now, but you can contact me through social media. I'm on Facebook, Stan Sorensen. I think I made it so long ago. I think it says I'm from Chapman University or something, but it's really Brahman now. But that's one way, Facebook, or you can go to my email. The one I love is scratch022@yahoo.com. I guess that's easy enough. And I think you typed it in. I don't know if you did or not. Or you can call me. Just call me on my phone number, 661-733-8444.
Awesome. Excellent. So for, from someone from, outside of Stan's world, so it's easy for you to find him. When you go to Facebook and you look for Stan, S-T-A-N, Sorensen, look for someone who has a picture of himself with a horse, with a white horse head. So that's like, definitely that's Stan Sorensen. You will know that you have found him when you see that picture. And as he said, it's scratch022@yahoo.com, his email address. Well, let's go to the questions, because we have plenty of questions. And your wisdom is so fascinating. It's so fascinating that I'm sure it's going to take some time with all those questions. I'm really amazed. I'm sure the audience is also amazed with all your words of wisdom tonight, Stan. So let me go to the first one.
You just boost me up so much.
Come on, let's go for that. So the first one, what would you advise to the parents who are raising small children right now? What would be your advice to them?
Oh gosh. The first 7 years of life is so important. That's the developmental years of life. And I've come to be so cognizant of what happens during those 7 years. Because when a person is 7 years old, that's when they make that very important fixated concept of themselves. So whatever that is has come from the download, because first 7 years of life, kids are basically on download, and they're just taking in information. This is what the world is like, and they're trying to figure it out, and their brain is developing. And so how would I raise children? Well, I don't know. I would be, I don't know how to say that in a simple answer, but I would be allowing children to raise themselves as much as possible, and not be having to put a lot of rules into the child, because that's just stuff they're going to have to unlearn later on if they want to be free. So there's certain things, of course, children need to learn. They need to socialize. They need to be domesticated, as Don Miguel Ruiz would tell us. Those are just part of normal life. And if you're responsible for taking care of the children, raising them, I would give them freedom within limits to be themselves, to be encouraged, to feel success in their efforts, because they will. And when they feel that, and they feel the support, I think it will give them a better opportunity to develop into adults that will be more courageous and more critically thinking of themselves and empathic with the world. Is that enough?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Next question. So what would you say to people who right now are struggling with alcoholism?
Well, if you're struggling with alcoholism, I would, for me, alcohol had a benefit at the beginning, and then it took over, and then it had a detriment. It started to cost more than it was worth. So I would want people to acknowledge that if you're struggling with alcohol or any addictive substance, any addictive behavior even, it's going to cost you. That's the usual definition of addiction, that it costs more than it's worth in the long run. Addictions are attractive because they give you immediate sense of relief of stress. I mean, that's the function of an addiction, is to give you that immediate sense of relief of stress. So if you're struggling with alcoholism, it may not be that you're necessarily seeking that immediate release of stress other than what you've built into as the addiction. Addictions are self-perpetuating. People that smoke, for example, smoke cigarettes, they say, well, I smoke to relax. Well, if they didn't have an addiction to tobacco, to nicotine, they would be relaxed. So the addiction just perpetuates itself, like I smoke that cigarette, I feel relaxed. Well, yeah, you're just feeding your addiction. You're feeding your alcohol addiction. People go into alcohol for a lot of different reasons. So struggling with it, I was just talking about that the other day. I didn't have a 12-step program to go to in the country, and I was in Japan, and I didn't have a 12-step program, so I just did it on my own when I decided. And in a way, that was good for me, but also in a way, it added to that 8 years it took to get to being okay. If I had a 12-step program, I think it might improve my chances a little better. But then on the other hand, 12-step programs have this thing, I'm an alcoholic. It's I am affirmation. And I always resist when I heard that. Oh no, I don't want to do that. I've learned that I am is a powerful word. You want to put alcoholic in there. Ooh, I haven't had a drink in 37, 8 years now. And I'm not going around saying I'm an alcoholic. I don't go to 12-step meetings. But there are other kinds of meetings that don't emphasize it's not just 12-step. I think there's a SMART meeting and there's rational recovery meetings. There are other alternatives, but get into one of those places where people will help you, because it is very hard to fight the compulsion. A compulsion is it's an automatic thing. Once it's the known way to reduce stress. Stepping into the unknown is a little scary, but I'll tell you, the unknown is not, there's nothing frightening there. There's a lot of frightening in the past and the known. So go meet new people and get a support system. I think that's critical. If you don't have a support system, it's very hard to do it on your own. I think I quit drinking. I don't know if I got through my alcoholism, because you can be alcoholic and non-drinking. But I remember it was a real struggle doing it by myself. So I would greatly appreciate having had a support group. And I did find a support group, though, eventually. And that did help. That gave me a new tribe to belong to. We all want to be a part of the tribe and be connected to something bigger than ourselves. And I think that would be my advice if you're struggling with alcoholism. Yeah.
Excellent.
I ran
Next
a
question.
I ran a drug and alcohol treatment program for 3.5 years as a director, and I got really experienced in the dynamics of that struggle.
Wow.
Taught me a lot.
Next one. What do you believe is the impact of group therapy in a person who had struggled with self-esteem issues?
Well, there's a lot of ways group therapy can help a person with esteem issues. They will sometimes find a universality amongst the group members that they all may have struggled with that. They may all be in different levels of struggling with that. So if you're in a group of people and somebody's getting their esteem back, getting their sense of self back, they're a little further on the road, and they're good role models or good examples that it can be done. Because often in the group, they'll tell their story about how they struggled up through the low self-esteem trap and found a way out of it. So I think it's an excellent place. I think it's better actually than individual therapy for that reason, because you will have a group of people that are all at different levels, and you'll find some connectivity belonging to that group. And that group will support and help you redefine yourself. And they will give you role models. They will give you how-tos in groups. The way I do groups anyway, I do a lot of experiential stuff. So having those experiences of experiencing yourself in situations that kind of trick you into realizing, hey, I just had this experience that didn't kill me. You know, hey, I just broke all the rules about keeping my family secrets to myself, and nobody's taking me out and hitting me or scorning me or throwing me out of the tribe. It gives a new tribe too. If you get into a cohesive group, you belong, and that belonging, I think, is great for reestablishing attachment. Many of us have broken attachments growing up because of abuse, because of separations, because of a lot of the people I work with, their attachments with their children are broken right now, and they're in the middle of it. They don't feel good about it. So I think the impact of group therapy on self-esteem is powerful, very powerful.
Excellent.
I got involved with groups in my recovery, and they, you know, they opened up a whole new potential, because I saw people like me at all different stages, and then I look at the ones that are really happy, and I want that. I want that. And I wouldn't have been exposed to that. I wouldn't have seen that if I hadn't gone to those groups. They weren't group therapies. They were just, they're the kind of groups that, well, they were human growth movement groups, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. Next question. Do you know of any techniques or tips that work well with teenagers under depression?
Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter if you're a teenager or an adult or whatever. There may be some differences because of age, but to me, I know that depression, the fuel of depression, is unexpressed, unresolved anger. It goes deeper than that, it goes into fear underneath that. But on the surface, the first thing that you have to contend with is anger. And people who stay depressed for a long time or get depressed often are stuck in their inability to express their anger, express that emotion, and then they're not able to kind of make peace with it or to resolve it. So if I were going to help anybody, including teenagers, I would first want to help them express, get that anger moving outward, not inward. Somebody once said depression is anger turned inward. Well, let's turn it outward. Let's point it to where the unfairness and the injustice is being generated in our own thinking. And there's a lot in that sentence. Let's turn it towards where the unfairness and injustice is being created by our own thinking. And then empty it out, get the energy out, because you've got to dissipate that negative energy. Once that's reduced out a little bit, then you can start looking at how did I create this as an injustice and an unfairness? And how can I resolve that? I might do that by asking a question. I love this question. I said, what's good about this? Because most of the time when we're mad at something, we don't see anything good about it. There's nothing good in there. You know, and I might ask, well, what's good about it? They say, not a damn thing. And I said, oh, okay, well, then what could be good about it? Soften the question a little bit. Make it a possibility, not necessarily something they have to do, but they could do, possibly. And get people to reframe those sources of unfairness and injustice. Kids are often not allowed to express, or they've been trained not to express, or they've been acting out and speaking code. Working with adolescents in particular, I think it's important to use empathy and genuineness. Avoid giving them advice and telling them how screwed up they are. I raised a son, and I actually used to be a professional parent. I ran a group home for wayward boys for 2 years. That was before I got my therapist gig going. So I learned a lot of the hard way how not to how to discourage kids, because when kids are discouraged, you know, they're going to go depressed, and they, you know, to get them out of that discouragement, you do the encouragement. You put the heart in. That's what courage is. Courage is heart. Encourage is put the heart in. So encourage them. Encourage them. Encourage
awesome.
them. Okay.
Next question, is drug abuse a failed attempt to connect with our spirituality?
It could be. I think there's this new drug out there in that area where we were just, you're still there. What is it, ayahuasca or something? Is that what it's called?
It's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
When people go to Peru or Puerto Rico, or not Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, whatever it is, to do the ayahuasca experiment, they're trying to connect with their spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, back in the days when I didn't participate, but back in the days when I was kind of growing up, Timothy Leary and Ram Dass, with what's that drug they used?
DMT?
The psychedelics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They were using those drugs to achieve spiritual connection. Mm-hmm. And so there's a bunch of people that probably did go after it in a spiritual way. The Toltecs teach about peyote and the loco weed. What's that called? I forget the name of that word. Anyway, there's a lot of traditions out there and cultures that actually use drugs to induce or to connect spiritually. And I think if you're under the right guidance, and I don't see anything, if that's what you want to do, I think there's some risk if you just try to do it on your own and not have the proper awareness of what to do. Because, you know, I read books by Carlos Castaneda. You know, he talked a lot about that journey to spirituality using drugs. You know, it hasn't been my journey. I haven't used it for that purpose. So I can't speak to it directly from my own knowing. But a lot of other people have just gone to drugs for self-medication to reduce their stress and their pain, their suffering. Or they've done it as a part of the culture of their peer group. Kids do that a lot, the teenagers. Oh, everybody else is doing it. I'll look like an outsider if I don't. And there's always that need to connect. Mm-hmm. And so kids, I think, get pulled into it until it becomes a problem.
Okay, next question. What is the best way to prevent drugs in teenagers?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. There's a lot of answers, just keep it out of their hands. I think the best thing is to help children develop their values early on, so that when it comes time for them to meet these temptations, that they have values that would be stronger than what people are getting out of this drug use. If I'm a teenager and I'm just wanting to belong to a group of people and be on the inside, I think if I had a value of sobriety, maybe spiritually based, I was talking to a young woman the other day in Cancun, and she was telling me about a book she's written, and it was all about spirituality and children and their spirituality. And I think, she was a Mexican woman, and she was thinking of it in the context of her country, Mexico. But I think it's universal. I think our children are not really educated at the earlier ages about their spirituality and their beingness. I think if that was developed earlier, when a teenager who has all these other compulsions and attractions and just full of energy and wants to do everything, then that would be helpful for them to avoid, because they're going to find it if it's out there. I didn't have drugs. I didn't ever use drugs, so they weren't available to me. So if you make them not available, okay, that's one way. But how do you stop that?
Excellent. Let me stop you just for a few seconds, because the sun is actually hitting you on your face, and we can hardly see your face. Could you soften that a little bit, if you were so kind?
The sun wasn't supposed to do that. I was gonna. What can I do?
Could you put your curtain down a little bit? No, don't move don't move the camera. Just the curtain.
Oh yeah. Sure.
The blinds or whatever it is that you have over there.
Yeah, if I can get.
It's possible. Awesome.
How's that?
Perfect. Oh, it's perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Sorry that I interrupted you, but I think that you already answered the question.
You told me that would happen.
Thank you. Thank you. So Maria Garcia was the one asking that question before. So thank you, Maria, for the question. Thank you very much. Next question. What do you think schools should do better to create awareness?
Well, I think what pops in my head is I think schools can train children in the techniques of mindfulness and meditation. You don't have to call it meditation, mindfulness, just teaching. I met you last year, and then I met one of the people that came to Mindalia to speak. His name was Michel Pascal. And he teaches different kinds of little short meditations. They're actually kind of fun, And I think if we taught children more self-awareness, breaking up the patterns that they get into, the habits they get into, by taking more time to do some meditation. For example, Michel Pascal's "I am a mountain," and just sit for 1 minute, closing your eyes, imagine yourself as a mountain, and just do that at the beginning of class or something like that. Or the next day, "I am a tree." You're rooted in the ground, but you're flexible. And the wind, and "I am the river." Now you're imagining. So teaching children to have that kind of way to, and they do it anyway. Probably children are better at that than most of us. So to encourage that kind of free-flowing awareness of energy, expanding energy awareness, expanding children's, kind of reminding children what they already knew, because I think the children knew that until they were reinforced to conform and follow the rules.
Thank you.
I think a school system ought to teach children to start breaking the rules and unlearning some of the unhealthy habits that they've accumulated.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a question coming from Margot Payne, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Next question. How can we all help people struggling with mental illnesses?
Well, acknowledge that we all have mental illness to some degree. Mental illness, I think, is inherent in our life. We just don't always get to the label of it on ourselves, but we have it. Everybody has it. So to show some compassion towards people that do have mental illness. And I also think that it's important to reframe mental illness into something that is not forever. It's temporary. And understanding the sources of mental illness, like understanding what are the sources of depression? What is anxiety? How is anxiety produced inside of me? You know, learning that our day-to-day reality is mostly not in the here and now. You know, that's why the books like or the focus on being in the present moment and the now experience and all that, I think are really important, because it's helping people break the pattern of always living in the past. You know, when you live in the past, something triggers you and it reminds you of something bad, and then you go into the future having to prepare for that bad happening again. And simultaneously, you're continually producing what Joe Dispenza calls the hormones of stress on a daily basis, even though nothing has happened, you know. So I don't know if I forgot the question, but hopefully I got an answer out.
How can we all help people struggling with mental illness?
Oh, okay. Accept that they're on a spectrum, maybe. If somebody's steeped in it, be caring. I mean, just show your caring towards them. That old cliche, I think, is very important, even though it's a cliche. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So be an example of caring and loving and accepting of them. You can help. You know, don't push them over there or pretend like, or look at them like, oh, you're weird, you know. But they're in a weird expression right now, but they're not. They're people. You know, they're humans. They're not a diagnosis.
Excellent. Next question. Philosophy when it comes to work with someone with a mental illness.
Something happened in the translation there. There was a.
Okay, so what is your main insight or philosophy when it comes to work with someone with a mental illness?
My philosophy. Gosh,
I don't know.
That's a deep question. Well, philosophy is really good. I've been studying the condition of mental illness for many, many, many years, and so my philosophy about, you know, that's a tough one. I haven't got it. It's fluid because it's changing all the time. I think doing something about it. My philosophy is it's all good and wonderful to know all this stuff, but how do we make a change? How do we help people change? And so I'm more focused on looking for the how-tos, not the what is it anymore. I've got enough what is it to do me forever. But how do we do something about it? So my philosophy of working with people with I don't know. I don't understand the question too much. My philosophy. Okay. I'm
fair enough.
I'm admittedly ignorant at times.
Okay, so what do you think about pharmaceutical prescriptions to treat mental illnesses?
I used to think, when I got my training, my formal training, I thought medications were not a good idea. I thought they just took care of the symptoms, which is basically what they do. But when I was working in a acute care hospital and somebody would come in really psychotic, I couldn't do much with them. It was really hard to do anything. So I started to appreciate some medications, because after people got on some medication, they start to come around, and then we can talk, and then we can go to the source. Then we can go after the source. But I think medication, my general view of medications is, unfortunately, there's a huge industry out there, pharmaceutical industry, and I think it's largely misguided or misdirected towards just producing stuff that helps people feel better from the moment, but doesn't get to the source. So I'm generally anti-medications, but I also realize sometimes there is a use for them. Sometimes, but I think we over depend on them. I think we have been conditioned to believe a chemical solution is here and now. It's great. Give me a pill. And people are paying. I mean, it's a whole part of our economy. And unfortunately, it gets stuck in that, because who does the research? Who pays for the research that shows you otherwise? Nobody, because no money in it. But if you want to get your research project paid for, the pharmaceuticals are happy if you find evidence that promotes chemical solutions.
I thought it was the last one, but actually we have more questions, Stan. So the next one is, do you think antidepressants help people with panic attacks or depression?
Yes, sometimes. I also know that therapy helps people just as much. Sometimes.
Sorry, I was going to say, there's a follow-up question saying, or do you recommend a holistic way?
Yes.
Better?
Yes. If I had all day to talk about it, I would say yes, the holistic is the better approach. There are many, many solutions to depression that have nothing to do with medications. I've seen people recover from depression from just introspection and becoming aware of and releasing and letting go. There's a whole method. It's called the Sedona method. I love it because it works quickly in releasing the stuff that creates depression and anxiety, panic and all that. Panic is just a trick in your brain that you just need to reveal that it's a trick, and then it'll go away. You can have the experience of inducing a panic attack and then getting up and doing jumping jacks. Well, that's ludicrous. You would never get up and do jumping jacks in the middle of a panic attack because you think you're going to die in 7 seconds. But if you did get up and realize, I'm not dying, whoa, it frees you. It teaches your whole system a new experience that before you didn't have that experience. Now you know you're not going to die in a panic attack. And usually they go away. They go away after that. They don't come back because you've exposed the trick that your mind has gone through. Okay? Any other questions?
Excellent. No, that was the last question, and actually that question was also coming from Margot Payne.
Oh, Margot.
So, yeah, there's a few things I want to thank you. There's a few things I want to say before we finish. Number one, people don't know this, but we have to really, really appreciate Stan being here with us today, because he had an unexpected procedure today done. exactly, in his lower part of his jaw. So I mean, that was completely unexpected. He didn't know that was going to happen today, but that still happened. But he still wanted to be here with us tonight. So we really have to appreciate it. Number two, obviously, I have to personally appreciate all the comments that you have made about me, or as you know, Stan is about us, and it's all about everybody that is around us, and that we have been working together for a long time. Number three, we have to appreciate you for being such a great supporter of Mindalia TV since the very beginning, and even before we launched Mindalia TV, he visited us. He visited Paola and Mirna and Eva and Alfredo in Los Angeles before we started to launch Mindalia TV in English. And for all those reasons, Stan, and for the first time ever, I'm going to answer your question about why that book was a defining moment in my life. So I'm gonna honor your question, and I'm gonna answer it. So basically, it was in Cuba, not far from here, and it was 2001. And when I finished that book, it was in a very, the scene was really magic. The sun was setting. I was in Varadero, in a villa, in a holiday resort in Cuba, north center of Cuba, more or less. And I had finished reading that book, and the Celestine's Prophecy talks about energy and spirituality. And for the first time in my life, I perceived this rush of amazing energy, and just intuitively, I knew I had to do something. And the first thing that came to my mind is I have to move from a good life, wonderful life in London, in the UK, although I'm originally from Spain, to the Americas. And what came more easily was Latin America and was Mexico. And eventually that became my life purpose, which is helping underprivileged kids in Latin America become entrepreneurs using their local resources, which is my life purpose. So that's why the Celestine's Prophecy book was such a defining moment for me. But again, this is an exception. I'm here to allow you to share all this wisdom, Stan. And I have to say, it's been an amazing interview today.
Well, you know what they say, the brain or the mind hates an unanswered question. So I had to get my question in there. So you're sitting, it's not answered. It's not answered. So.
It's answered now. So it's answered now. Before we go again, would you mind repeating or reminding our audience on Mindalia TV where can we find you, Stan, online?
Well, you can find me at my email address, or you can find me on Facebook. Sometimes I go there. Sometimes I'm in a nice little group, 2 groups now called WhatsApp, where people find me. But I'll just stick to the email address scratch022@yahoo.com. It's probably the best way. And or call me up or whatever. Put some comments down below and tell me you want to connect.
Excellent. Would you remind us of your phone number, if you don't mind?
Oh, it's 661-733-8444.
Excellent. Well, again, Stan, it's been a blessing. I've enjoyed every single word, every single minute of your interview.
My hope and my knowing is that somebody, if they actually listened to this interview, where either something stuck, something would click in their mind and they will think about it. I hope. I know it happened. If nobody got something out of it, I know Margot did.
Everybody. Again, well, this interview will be.
And I hope my new friend Marcy from Mexico City is in the audience, and she said she would be. She was an inspiration to me for a whole week. So when we get together and we find out that the purpose of our life is to love and to give. That's the message.
Again, thank you. Thank you very much, Stan, and for to everybody. Again, this is Angel Rebo with Mindalia TV, and thank you very, very much for being with us today, and see you soon. Bye-bye.